But to break it down a little bit more for you, I have Stefano Da Fre, actor and director of Stolen Dough. We've had him on the show before. Thank you so much for joining me today. Are you surprised at all that they're going back to the drawing board? You know, what were your thoughts when you heard the writers came up with a deal?
First of all, I'm so happy to be back on your show to be talking to you about this. People are out of work. And when people are out of work, and there's not enough content being made, everybody feels strained. So the production side feels strained, and also the writers. So when the writers were really talking very specifically last week, for 4 days straight in a room for like 10 hours a day, you knew a deal was going to come out. It's normal that this was wrapped out first because they've been on strike since May. The actors have been on strike since July, and I think they're very serious, and I think the producers are very serious to finding a deal, so I was not surprised.
Now, as someone who you've mentioned that you've worked on the health board for SAG before, and I think what a lot of people are probably confused about is what is it that the writers were asking for that the actors were also. So, for example, AI, the usage of artificial intelligence, better pay, working conditions for them. So since they possibly could be similar, in your experience, do you think that we could be coming to a deal fairly soon with the Actors Union?
It's a very good question, Tani. It's a very good question. And let's talk a little bit about the crossovers for your viewers right now, right? AI is the elephant in the room. So what kind of protections do you have? For the writers, they gave them protections in terms of how it would be used for machine learning in terms of creating content, so that the actual scripts would not help the AI learn, and so that they would be basically protected under the WGA. For the actors, it's their likeness. I'll give you a very practical example. The producers were proposing that if I came into work to work on HBO's That Damn Michael Che, I did that last year. I was in one episode. If they need me for another episode with this new contract, they would have been able to use my face, my likeness, for the rest of the season without paying me. And the way that the actors are saying is like, listen, if we don't have our likeness, we do not have ourselves. We don't have our livelihood. Number two, I want to talk a little bit about healthcare. 80% of actors don't make the minimum requirement for healthcare. That's $26,000. So we have to find a solution that you actually can be able to have proper health and care for yourself as you're working through this in a professional environment, right? Second thing is, linear television was very good in the old days. It was an advertising model. Streaming is still broken and is still in its growing infancy, and we tend to be, as consumers, watching more streaming than watching cable. The actors are asking for 2% of revenue, 2%. Right now they're getting 0. That's why there are no residuals. When I worked on a show for HBO, I didn't get any residuals because it was on HBO Max, and you can't make a living like that. In the old days, when you worked on Blue Bloods, if you worked on Friends or Seinfeld, the actors made a sustained living when the shows went into reruns, and they were able to get that rerun money and help pay for their health expenses and for their living expenses, and it also counted towards their health care.
And I think you bring up a really good point, especially in terms of healthcare, because as I mentioned, we do hear artificial intelligence, we do hear better pay in circumstances, but healthcare, I mean, that is a basic need that a lot of people need. So definitely important that you mentioned that. Now, I do kind of want to go back to when this all began. This was a few months ago, right before the summer started. I think a lot of people were probably shocked that this was even going on once the writers announced that they were going on strike, and shortly after the actors did as well. as someone who's in the industry, how important is it to see the unity between the writers and the actors? I mean, they're two different organizations, the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA, but work in the same industry. So how important is it, and how was it for you to see such unity happen over the last several months?
Well, it was touching. It was incredible. It was powerful, and it was also a message to the industry that we as creators, we as artists, have the same issues with the producers, and that type of unity is what's going to keep us strong. I've been on the picket lines for the WGA. I've met many people from the WGA who have been on the picket lines in New York City, locally where I live, and there is that cross respect, that love, because the writers and the actors need each other and recognize each other as artists. I think, and I want to make a second point a little bit more delicately, I think that it would have been better for the unions to wrap out the deals at the same time, because you would have been able to both agree on the real needs that you need for both unions. I think now, with the actors still left and the writers wrapped up with their deal, there is pressure on the negotiating team for SAG-AFTRA to get this deal done. And so personally, this is only my personal opinion, being a member from SAG-AFTRA, that it would have been nice to see both unions come to an agreement at the same time, so that we were both in lockstep with each other. But again, that's not the writers' fault. Most of the writers that are not on, they're not on the board, and they're not involved in the national negotiations. So it's a decision that the higher ups had made, and they saw a good deal and they wanted to take it.
Right, absolutely, and probably not an easy one for both parties, as they both want the strike to end, everyone to go back to their jobs, and essentially, just like the pandemic, for people to just go back to normal and how things were, but under different circumstances.